are here at Into the Light for our next video chat with our lead trainer, crisis response advocate, turning program manager, Beth. And if you remember last time, we were talking about how trafficking happens here in small town America, in rural settings, and the suburbs and the city, pretty much everywhere. We talked last time about organized crime. Isn't that correct, Beth?
And the different apps, we looked at those, some TikTok, and how they work, fishing for information on the different apps.
Yes. So this time we are talking about a Romeo scam. And can this happen with organized crime? I mean, it has a little part of it, right, where they act like the Romeo.
Right, right.
And then there's individuals, correct?
Right. You're absolutely correct. So today we'll focus more on the individuals, the individual Romeo scams.
So basically they're just individual predator type men.
Right.
They may be pedophiles that have figured out how to make money.
Right, right. So very often we see this happening online, but it can also happen in person. So with the online version, they will use that information that they have fished, looking at children's personal social media and the things that they put out there about themselves to make that child feel like this person really knows them and really cares for them. We use that term Romeo from Romeo and Juliet. I think most people understand that concept, but there's just something about the way that a woman or a young girl is made, that she wants to be romanced, she wants to be pursued, she wants to feel like she's somebody's one and only.
So he will compliment her, and it does translate into in person eventually, right? Like he'll send her gifts, maybe?
Right, that often happens. We see it again and again, that this relationship will begin to develop online, and there'll be gifts and there'll be compliments and everything that child's heart longs to hear. And then they'll set up a time to meet, and the child feels like they know this person very well. Time passes differently when you're a child. 6 months feels like forever. Well, I've known him 6 months. He's my friend.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So they're basically trying to convince that child that they are in love with them.
Right, right. And there's a hunger there. I want to be loved. And especially if those needs aren't being met in a healthy way at home, that leaves an even greater vulnerability.
I think, adolescents and teenagers seem to all have that feeling that no one understands them. A lot of them struggle with loneliness.
Yeah.
They sometimes feel misunderstood. Communication with parents during those years can be very challenging.
Right. I think any of us that have lived through our teenage years have came to that age that we still remember those feelings, what it felt like, because they were so strong and so powerful.
The hormones seems to intensify all emotions for teenagers.
And just that feeling of I'm alone and nobody understands me, and then here's someone that all you got to do is click on, and there they are, ready to make you feel loved.
And then don't they sort of have, teenagers seem to have a invincibility, like they feel like nothing can hurt them. It's not going to happen to me. So even if they have any red flags go off, they just are like, no, he would never do that. Right?
Right. And all of us can relate to that. The crazy things we did as teenagers, thinking, oh, it won't happen to me. I'm like you said, invincible. And developmentally, when we're talking about 13, 14, 15-year-olds and on up, their mind doesn't fully connect all the dots yet.
Right.
If this happens, it's going to lead to this, which can lead to this. They don't have that yet. They're very much in the moment, and you probably remember that as a teenager too.
Yes.
You're in a very intense now.
Right. Can't necessarily think through the unintended consequences or what's going to happen later. You're just I understand.
Yeah.
So what about? I mean, obviously it's kids. Any kids this can happen to. But tell me about the added vulnerability of children in the foster care system.
The most vulnerable group would be, the most absolute vulnerable group is runaways.
Okay.
But the kids that are more likely to be targeted are kids that have been part of Child Protective Services, the juvenile justice system, and have a history of abuse. And
Right.
very
So
often,
one of the reasons they'd be running away is because they're being abused at home.
right, very often a child will have all three of those.
Wow.
If you're part of Child Protective Services and part of the foster care system, there's a very good chance you've been part of the juvenile justice system too.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes kids end up in juvenile justice system just because we don't have anywhere else to put them. I say we, I mean society, not into the light. Society doesn't have any place else to put them, so they end up behind bars. We have a terrible track record in Arkansas of locking up children that really need help, but instead they're being punished.
Yeah.
So what about these foster kids? Let's talk about that just a minute, and the missing kids. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's president, there are 1.7 million runaways in the U.S., and only about 1/4 to 1/3 of those are ever reported as missing.
Wow.
So you have a whole category of kids that they call throwaways that are missing and nobody's looking for them.
So those are kids that maybe were in foster care and ran off, and then, you know, the overworked case managers, you know, or people that work for those agencies, don't know, you know, they figure they're out there. Maybe they just don't have the whatever they need to. They're not really reported missing. They just figure they've gone off on their own. If they're 16 or 17 or even almost 16, they probably figure they're doing what they want to do, and there's not much they can do about it, right?
Our social service workers are so overworked,
Yes.
such heavy caseloads that no fault there, they just are very overloaded.
Right.
And sometimes when a family disintegrates, especially where there's drug use, nobody knows where the kids are. And they'll say, oh, I'm going to my aunt's, and they never show up at the aunt's and nobody bothers to check.
Right, because those parents or guardians have a lot of their own issues or problems, so that they just
Yeah,
So those kids are targeted.
very much so, because they have no support system. They're just out there on their own. And
how do they find them?
very often, if they're on the streets, then your traffickers, they're very much like street psychologists. They can see these kids' vulnerabilities from a mile away. The aloneness, everything they own in a backpack, looking scared and lost. And so they will target them on the streets like that, and then online too. It's not unusual for a kid to be away from home but still have their social media accounts and everything.
Yeah, I know in generations past, you know, many young people would migrate to the cities, you know, thinking that there's more opportunity there, I can make it there, I can do this on my own, I can be a movie star or whatever, that kind of thing. That probably still happens, right? Where they say, oh, well, it's really going on in Kansas City or whatever, so they go somewhere in a bigger city and they are on the street.
We see that a lot in Atlanta. I've been on webinars with detectives from Atlanta that have such a large homeless population of youth, and in Dallas and Houston also too. Arkansas kids end up around Dallas quite a bit because it's not so far and it feels like a big city and everything, and then they end up homeless. There are actually cities that have homeless population of youth that are bigger than our county.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So, so the traffickers go from internet to real life. They do this gradually, can take months, but eventually they do meet with the kid. And how can Into the Light help? You know, I know educating others, so one of the things maybe is seeing the kids, right, for what they really are.
Right, that's so important, that we see them as victims of sex trafficking or survivors of sex trafficking, and not see them as bad kids. Right. If we can just write them off as bad kids and think that we don't have any responsibility toward them. I was just reading a local news article about someone that had an adult male had a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old exchange sexual favors for a ride, and he was given a slap on the wrist.
Oh,
And that's
yeah,
not right.
that's- no, that's
it's not
not
right.
right.
They didn't recognize it as child sex trafficking.
Right. Because it would have continued and grown.
Right.
You know,
right.
this time it's a ride, and next time it's something else, and next thing you know, he's trafficking them to other men and making lots of money. I mean, maybe not every type predator will escalate, but I think it's been proven that they do.
Mm-hmm.
It gets worse over time if they don't get stopped.
And every time we see an article like that, where someone has had a child exchange sex acts for something of value, and it's not treated as sex trafficking, we're sending a message out there to all those traffickers that it's okay.
Right.
And we're sending the message that we don't value our children.
Right. And they don't see them as children, even
No.
though their brains have not fully developed and they are children.
Mm-hmm. They're just bad kids. They shouldn't have done this, or they shouldn't have
Right.
done
Shouldn't
that.
have been out there looking
Not
for
what
a
they
ride.
deserve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. So the biggest thing would be to get educated and have a heart of compassion for kids who might appear to be, incorrigible or just bad kids, that there's usually a reason they are the way they are, and we need to love them just as Christ loves them, right?
And even love the predators. We've got to love the predators too,
Yes.
because they were once children, and something went wrong in their life.
Yeah,
But
I was
there has
actually,
to be justice.
yes, there does have to be justice, but I was actually praying for the owners of Pornhub, and I would encourage any of you that want to join me, because if we could shut that down, that would be really big,
Yeah.
that would be really big, because that's free,
Right.
and it's terrible. So we want to thank you. Is there anything else?
Oh, just another stat for you. 1 in 6 runaways reported to NCMEC were likely victims of trafficking. NCMEC meaning the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And of those, 88% of those were in the care of social services.
Wow.
So again, it emphasizes the need for family. Children weren't meant to be raised by the government. They were meant to be raised by families that knew them and nurtured them and kept up with where they were at and fed into their little hearts the things their little hearts are hungry for.
Yes. Love on your children. Make sure you tell them how beautiful, sweet, smart, fantastic they are. Anyway, we want to thank you for joining us again. We appreciate you watching these, and we really appreciate you sharing. And if you could comment, that would be great for us to get a little feedback and make sure that, that we're doing this well, and that we're helping others to get educated, and people are actually enjoying the videos. That would be great. And if you would like to make a donation or want more information, you can go to intothelightUS.org. We thank you again, and thank you, Beth.
Well,
and
thank you.
we hope all of you have a wonderful day.